This week, I learned about how mental health affects the military, what they face, what to do about it, and I am sharing it with you.
Today, we are going beyond the front lines. We're going to navigate the incredibly important topic of mental health within the military community. You know, it's a complex mission, for sure, but it's one that's really defined by resilience, by recovery, and most importantly, by hope. So let's get into it. Let's kick things off with this really powerful idea. Mental health isn't about what's missing or what's wrong. It's about what makes us strong. It's the very foundation of our emotional, our psychological, and our social well-being. And you know, while that's true for absolutely everyone, for those in service, it's a matter of strategic readiness and, frankly, personal survival. All right, here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start by getting on the same page with some key terms. Then, we'll zoom out and look at the global picture, before zeroing in on the specific risks in the military. From there, we'll explore those invisible wounds and, crucially, we'll finish by focusing on the powerful solutions, everything from community support to strategies you can use yourself.
Okay, so if we're going to have a real conversation about this, we first need to speak the same language. Getting these definitions right is our essential first step so we can talk about the nuances of mental health without any stigma or confusion.
So, let's be super clear. When we say mental health, we're talking about this positive, foundational state. It's the platform that we all operate from, how we engage with the world, and how we perform our duties. It's the goal, you see, not the problem.
Now, let's get a bit more specific. A mental disorder, according to the World Health Organization, isn't just having a bad day or feeling bummed out. The key phrase here is clinically significant disturbance. This means it's something that is actively getting in the way of your ability to function, and it's a diagnosable condition.
And finally, we have the biggest, most inclusive term, mental health condition. Think of this as the giant umbrella that covers pretty much everything, from those officially diagnosed disorders to other states of serious distress that might not fit into a neat clinical box, but are every bit as real and just as impactful.
So, with those definitions locked in, let's zoom out. Before we dive deep into the military aspect, it's so important to understand that this is a universal human challenge. Nobody is immune, and the scale, well, it's massive.
Just take a second and let that number sink in. 1 in 7. That's over 1.1 billion people. This isn't some niche issue affecting a small group. It is a fundamental part of the global human experience. And that context is so important because it reminds us that service members and veterans are part of a much, much larger story.
So let's look at some of the most common conditions. Right at the top, you've got anxiety disorders, affecting a staggering 359 million people. And this is way more than just feeling nervous. We're talking about disruptive conditions of excessive fear and worry. And right behind that is depression, which is defined by that persistent low mood and a loss of interest that goes way beyond just feeling sad. These numbers really help you grasp the sheer scale of what people are facing every single day.
Okay, now it's time to narrow our focus. We've seen the big picture, but the unique environment of military service, well, it can act like a risk magnifier. And a landmark study from the King Center for Military Health Research actually puts numbers to this.
What this study did was incredible. It compared over 1,000 veterans with a perfectly matched group of civilians to see exactly how service impacts mental health. Now, the numbers we're about to look at are called adjusted odds ratios, or AOR. All you really need to know is this: an AOR of 2 means the risk is twice as high. Simple as that.
And this is where the data becomes incredibly clear. Look at that highest bar. The increased risk for veterans for stress disorders is at an AOR of 2.84. That means veterans are nearly 3 times more likely to face these conditions than their civilian peers. And you can see significantly higher risks for personality and psychosis disorders too. This isn't just a feeling or an anecdote. It is a quantifiable, measured reality.
Now here's where things get really fascinating. Check out this substance use paradox. On one hand, harmful alcohol misuse is nearly 4 times higher in veterans. But on the other, they're significantly less likely to have a drug disorder. So what's going on there? Well, it seems to be a direct result of military culture, right? Alcohol is often more socially integrated, while there's a very strict zero-tolerance policy on illicit drugs. It's just a powerful example of how our environment shapes our coping mechanisms, for better and for worse.
So now we need to go even deeper than just diagnoses. We have to understand the specific psychological injuries that are so common in a military context. You often hear these called the invisible wounds of service, and for good reason.
Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is probably the most well-known of these wounds. The WHO breaks it down into this triad of symptoms. First, you have re-experiencing the trauma, like it's happening all over again. Second, there's the active avoidance of anything that might trigger those memories. And third, a constant, heightened sense of threat, just being on high alert 24/7. It's like being trapped in the past.
But, and this is so important, not all invisible wounds are based on fear like PTSD. There's also this critical concept of moral injury. It's really important to know this is not a mental illness you'd find in a diagnostic manual. It's a psychological wound, sometimes called a soul wound, that comes from doing or seeing things that violate your deepest moral beliefs, and that requires a very different kind of healing.
Okay, we've laid out the challenges. Now let's pivot to the solutions. And the absolute first line of defense, the most critical asset in recovery, is what we're calling the support squadron. The family, the friends, and the community standing shoulder to shoulder with the service member. This number really says it all. 25%. That is the real, tangible, life-saving difference that family involvement can make. It cuts the chance of relapse by a quarter in that critical first year. This isn't just about feeling supported. This is a clinical game changer. And that support isn't just random acts of kindness. It can actually be structured into what's known as a pyramid of care. At the very bottom, you have practical support. That's helping with appointments, medication, just daily tasks. Above that, families can help design realistic treatment plans. And at the very top, you have psychoeducation. That's learning about the condition to replace judgment with real understanding. It's a whole support system.
And beyond the immediate family, there are tactical skills the entire community can learn. Mental health first aid gives people a strategic toolkit. It teaches you how to spot those early warning signs, how to start a safe conversation, how to act as a bridge to professional help, and, so importantly, how to actively dismantle the stigma that keeps people from asking for that help in the first place.
Community support is absolutely vital, but so is individual empowerment. So let's open up the personal toolkit. These are evidence-based strategies that anyone can use to manage their own mental health and build that resilience.
Here is an incredibly simple but unbelievably powerful technique for those moments of panic, anxiety, or flashbacks. It's called the 5-4-3-2-1 method. You just stop and you anchor yourself in the present moment by using all your senses. Name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste. It literally pulls your brain out of that spiral and plants it firmly back in a here and now.
Another powerful tool comes from cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. It's basically a 4-step process for taking on those negative thought patterns. First, you identify that automatic thought, like, I'm a complete failure. Then you analyze it. Is this black and white thinking? Next, you challenge it like a detective. Where's the actual evidence for this thought? And finally, you restructure it into something more balanced and realistic. It's like doing reps at the gym, but for your mind.
In the end, recovery isn't some big mystery. It's a pathway. It's a structured journey that moves from intensive care to a long-term wellness plan, all supported by the community. It's a mission, and it's a mission that can absolutely be completed successfully. And that really leaves us with one final thought. Resilience isn't something you're just born with. It's a strategic choice, a skill that can be practiced, honed, and built every single day.
Did you learn something new and exciting about helping people with mental health issues? Share it here. I want to know about it too.